The real war is not kinetic. The real war is financial. And we're going to bottle up that nest of vipers who think they run the world in Europe. You pissed off the Russians. You've declared war on the United States. You think you're going to turn Canada into our enemy? Have you ever considered what happens when Bitcoin has to operate in a world where the Fed actually defends itself? Okay. And I've been saying for years that if you want something to really bake your friggin' noodle, just wait for the day that the Fed puts Bitcoin on its balance sheet. Or did it already do so by proxy?
Envision a world where the fiat system as we know it is crumbling, and the battle lines aren't drawn with tanks or bombs, but with dollars dead and digital currencies. Today we're joined by the brilliant Tom Luongo, a chemist-turned-political strategist who now runs the cutting newsletter and podcast Gold, Goats, and Guns. Tom spent years decoding the chaotic web of global finance, central banking, and the shadowy cabal pulling the strings, bringing insights you won't find anywhere else. In this episode, we're diving into the deep end, what Mark Carney's rise means for Canada and its ties to globalist agendas, why national identity could be the key to surviving a world gone mad, and how Bitcoin factors into a new age. Plus, we'll unpack the Federal Reserve's power moves against Europe and what they mean for the global economy. Want to know who's really winning the financial war and how to stay out of the crossfire? This is the episode that'll blow the lid off. Going beyond Bitcoin to give you the skills and insights you need to escape the fiat matrix, this is Mentor Sessions.
Awesome, Tom. Thanks for joining us. I want to kick things off kind of immediately by, now that we've actually seen that the Canadian population has decided to just commit suicide at large and elect the twice central banker to the Supreme Emperor of Canada, I want to get your kind of initial thoughts, what you're seeing, where you think this is going.
It's really funny. Thanks for the invite, Nathan and Gary. It's good to meet you guys. Mark Carney is a very interesting problem, right? Because he's clearly the dude, like Mr. WEF, Mr. Globalist, Mr. Central Banker. And it's really funny how his apologists were all out there screaming how he beat Trump in a bond war and all of this stuff. And I was like, no, he didn't. Like, Trump set a trap and baited him, and there's Trump and Besson set a trap and baited him. And, then they blew up the basis trade and treasuries and forced those guys to dump about, $200-300 billion worth of treasuries on the market. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. There's this ammo that you don't have anymore. It's like Carney is, he's a very interesting figure because he's led such a charmed life. Like these guys, Justin Trudeau's and the Tony Blair's and all the rest of them, they've all hit triples, were born on third base and thought they had to hit triples, right? And Carney, as long as he's not challenged in any way, he sounds very competent. The minute you challenge him, of course, he's not. So he's not very smart, just like, Kaja Kallas or Ursula von der Leyen or Jacinda Ardern or any of these other people. Justin Trudeau. And he does what he's told. And he might have a lot of experience of running financial operations on other countries when the playing field has been tilted in his favor. And that's the way he ran the Bank of England, the way he ran the Bank of Canada in the past. And he did so, setting up both of those countries to roll up all of their wealth and shunt it over to Brussels and to Germany and to Amsterdam and City of London, which is effectively all the same. Now that we really get clarity on these things, and we're watching these things play out over the last few months, really getting clarity on that. The City of London, Brussels, Amsterdam, it's all the same freaking thing. What I've always called Davos. I wasn't ever sure where City of London sat in that axis, that they could go either way, but I'm now firmly convinced that they're part of the whole process, and they're the thing that has undermined Brexit and tried to undermine Trump in the past and everything else. And MI6 is aligned with that, GCHQ. And all of that stuff. So, and Carney's aligned with all of those people. So what's he going to do to Canada now? Well, he's clearly trying to set Canada up as as kind of Ukraine for the United States. And Ukraine was today's Ukraine, or the Ukraine of the last 20 years, was set up to be an antipode and to be a thorn in the side of Russia and to be a vector with which you would undermine and destabilize the Russian border, terrorizing the Russian people in the Donbass, attack Crimea, all that stuff. Now, the idea, I was just talking to my partner Dexter White about this morning, the ludicrous idea that Canadians are going to arm themselves to the point where they're going to be able to stand up for more than 27 minutes against anything that the United States decides to, offhandedly throw your direction. Well, that's laughable on the face of it. It would almost be like, oh, I don't know, me getting a bunch of my mates together and wanting to play against, Ovechkin and the Capitals, and let's see who comes out in the game of shinny. Right.
Yeah.
So just to remind everybody, I am that much of a hockey guy. I know what the word shinny means. Now, saying all that, what's he going to do? Well, he's clearly going to set up the Bank of Canada and the Canadian banking system as a form of offshore Eurodollar laundering system in order to try and make sure that the drug and oil money continues to flow out of Canada and back into Europe. It's also at the same time, though, a very desperate play by Davos to find some amount of physical collateral that they can lay their hands on, because they've declared war on Russia. And they're not going to win there. Trump just bought Ukraine. Everybody's getting this Ukraine minerals deal with all wrong. Trump just bought Ukraine, and he bought it out from underneath the Brits and in the EU, and they're fucking huge mad. Okay?
Can you expand on that for anyone who might not be familiar with the recent deal?
Well, the deal itself is it's being touted as the minerals deal, and everybody's focusing on the rare earths because Trump did. Because Trump said, "Ooh, big shiny, we're going to talk about the rare earths." There are no rare earths in outside of the Donbass, and everybody knows that, including Trump, including all of his people. But he puts it out there as an antipode to China, as a quote unquote blocking move to China, and to get everybody focused on the wrong thing. Well, he goes about the process of cutting a deal that will literally rebuild Ukraine, and guess who gets the rebuilding contract? It's not us. It's not Europe. And it's not the City of London, and it's probably not even going to be BlackRock who maps to those guys. It's going to be our guys, and it's probably going to be led by Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan. So we get that. We're going to have access to that. We're going to get, we're going to pull a royalty stream off of rebuilding Ukraine. And it's the same, in effect, it's the same kind of deal that he put on the table for Gaza. Now everybody in the shitbag left, and the, MI6 and European controlled media then turned that into, oh, he wants to build Trump Tower in Gaza. What an asshole. Like, no, dudes, have you been to, as Trump said, have you been to Gaza? Like, they don't even run running water, for Christ's sake. It's going to take 10 years to bring civilization back to Gaza, given what the Israelis have done to it. I'm not here to condone or not. I'm staying completely out of the whole fucking Israeli Gaza thing. That's just reality on the ground, and that's all Trump was talking about. And he wanted to get the Arabs to buy into the whole process and make everybody now responsible for what happened in Gaza by making them pay for the rebuilding. Right? Because at the end of the day, don't let anybody of these people kid you. The only people who are honest about their opinion of the Palestinians are the Israelis. Everybody else, hates them too. So, but now what Trump was trying to do was get everybody who hates, all of these people, and hates the Palestinians, have always thought of them as a political tool to advance their own geopolitical agendas. They went into use it or lose it mode, and now he's trying to get them buy-in from them to rebuild Gaza, and the Israelis are saying nuts to that. Netanyahu in particular are saying nuts to that. So Carney, all of this, what you see in Gaza and Israel, what you see in Ukraine, Russia, is what they're setting up for U.S. and Canada. Now, what they're setting up, and it's kind of what they set up down in Mexico as well, which is why Scheinbaum told Trump, "Oh no, we're not. Our loyalty our sovereignty is not for sale," which is bullshit, honey. You got cartels in your border. You can't deal with them. You're bought and owned by the cartels. We will go in with A-10 warthogs and we will wipe them all out for you if you give us, if you don't, we're going to declare legally why it is that we can go and invade your country to wipe out the goddamn cartels, because that's what we're going to do, because we're the Americans and we control North America, and consensus feminist politics does not matter anymore, and this is what's going to happen. I'm not telling you this is what I like. This is what I'm telling you what's going to happen, because Trump is done with having national security issues on his border. He's going to turn into James Polk, 54-40 or fight, meaning I want all of Alberta, all of Saskatchewan, and all of British Columbia. That matters, and the rest, and y'all can starve, because we don't care anymore, because you've had a choice. And you chose poorly. That's where we are. Now, Albertans, hey, you're more than welcome. British Columbia, outside of Vancouver, you're more than welcome. We got to wall that off and turn it into a John Carpenter movie. Saskatchewan, we want the Athabasca Basin, and we're going to get it. We're going to get Greenland, and we're going to bottle up that nest of vipers and vampiric pedophilic elites who think they run the world in Europe, and we're going to bottle them up underneath a southern or Southern European / Northern Mediterranean alliance. That's what there's going to be a new NATO long term. Spain, Italy, Greece, the Balkans versus rump Europe. We control Ukraine. Turkey controls Syria and the Eastern Mediterranean. And we buy Greenland. And we free some part of the UK, and we bottle up Europe and say, go get your physical collateral to run your Green New Deal somewhere else. How are you going to do it? You pissed off the Russians. You've declared war on the United States. You think you're going to turn Canada into our enemy? We'll just invade it. And if we have to, we'll just bomb Toronto and be done with it. I'm dead serious. Like at some point, you have. I'm not. I mean that in almost metaphorically. But if Mark Carney wants to push this, right? If Mark Carney wants to escalate the same way that Vladimir Zelensky, so refused to Ukrainify anything in this world anymore because Ukraine's not a real country either. Like this is what's going on, and you all better get your head wrap your heads around it. That this idea that most of America gives a second thought as to what happens north of the 49th parallel. I hate to break it to everybody, but we don't care. We care in Florida because you people clog up our roads because you don't know how to drive. Okay? Because you're used to driving 55 and 60 miles an hour and we do 90 down here. Like, get over it. I kid mostly. I love Canadians. Don't get me wrong. I really do. I love hockey. I love Rush. I love going to Alberta. I love you guys. I don't want you to make bad choices, but what am I going to do? It's like having a friend who keeps saying, no, my drug habit's under control. No, I can handle a 12th beer tonight. And then you tell him no, and he just like drinks it anyway. What are you going to do? And after a while, you get frustrated with it. And I think and we have to realize that Mark Carney is doing everything he can to inflame that opposition. But in some ways, he's actually doing Canadians a favor because we're starting to see a little bit of Canadian nationalism. We're starting to see a little bit of Canadians standing up for themselves and saying, well, what do you believe in? What is it to be Canadian? Remember when Carney was asked this? He was asked, what is it to be Canadian? And his answer was very telling because what did he say? We're not American.
Yeah, I was going to say, he said we're not American, probably. It's always like the antithesis. It's being compared to the U.S.
And when you cannot define yourself in a positive sense as something, you have no ethos.
Yeah. You
have no identity. If your identity is, I'm not those guys, then who the hell are you? You have to be able to stand up and go, we're Canadian. What does being Canadian mean? I want you guys to answer that question. I know what I mean. I watch Western Canadian hockey players all the time. I know what those guys stand for. I love those guys. I would, if I was building a Stanley Cup team, my top two left defensemen would be from the Western Hockey League. They'd be 6'3", and it would never cross the red line, and that would be the end of it. And they would, elbow everybody who thought that they had moves coming across the blue line, other than Alexander Ovechkin, because I know he would skate right through them anyway. But everybody else, they get the Scott Stevens treatment. That's what I want, right? And I know those guys have an ethos. But what do we have in the Greater Toronto Area? What do we have from that? We don't have an ethos. We'd like to. I'd like to see that, but we don't see it. I mean, we know what it is to be American. Very large, whatever, you place a value judgment on that all you want. I don't care. It doesn't have to be anything salutary, folks. I'm not but we know what it means to be American. We know that.
As a fellow American, I used to think that. I guess I'm just not sure anymore. And maybe that's just me. I could tell you easily, we're for individual liberty and, going our own way and, self-determination and, spirit of can do. And I don't know if that's the case anymore. I don't know. Maybe that's just
depends on where you are. I know down here in Florida it's that way. It's like, I know, we know what we stand for. We stand for all of those things, and we stand for what those ideas that were embodied in the Constitution. And what as my friend Ian Burlingame would put it, our birthright is Englishmen, not British. Englishmen who, gave us the Magna Carta, then gave us, then gave us democracy, the real democracy where the people were sovereign over, and the king had a responsibility to his people, and it was a relationship. It was a martial relationship, but it was a relationship nonetheless. We did at one point, I think, and for my people, my ancestors, they came over from Italy. Now they only came over 100 years ago, but what were they? They came over here. They were Italian, but they were also rejecting Europe. They could balance those two things at the same time. Say, we're not Europeans anymore. We are Italians who have become Americans. Like my grandparents, all four of them came over on the boat between 1906 and 1911 and raised their families here. And I'm the youngest of four of the youngest of 11. I'm only second generation. My grandparents all came over on the boat. And they all ran their households the same way. Their children don't know how to speak Italian. My parents didn't know how to speak Italian. None of my parents' siblings knew how to speak Italian. They all grew up in the household teaching their parents English because they came over here and said, we are Americans now.
Yeah. Now, my father's the same way. He came from Egypt in 1970, and he very much raised me as an American. Like I know the swear words in Arabic, but other than that, mom, baseball, apple pie, that's I'm American as the next kid.
Right. I laugh when I was watching the Sopranos recently. Right. I'd never watched the Sopranos because I didn't have HBO back when it came out. We started watching it, and I got about 4 seasons in before all of the betrayals of Tony by his friends like triggered the shit out of me, and I couldn't watch it anymore because I've been betrayed way too many times in my life. But watching them talk in northern New Jersey, I grew up in southern New York. I grew up about 40 miles north of where the Sopranos takes place, and all of the pidgin Italian and how they talk about the food. Like, and all their weird Italian, it's all pidgin Italian, how they talk about the food. It's hilarious. Like gabagool is not real. It's capicola. I mean, you know what I mean? and I was just laugh my ass off because that was my household. Right. And
by the way, side note for you, I don't mean to derail the conversation, but I used to give a Sopranos bus tour as a side job as an actor. And one of the neat facts about the show is when they cast it, they said all the main actors had to either be of Italian descent or live in the New York, New Jersey area for at least 2 years prior to being on the show, so their accents are authentic. Yes. That was very much
and they were. And they were. Like I don't speak like I used to when because I graduated high school and came to Florida, right? And so over the course of time, I've lost. I used to speak just like Tony Soprano, for Christ's sake. Hey, let's go to the mall. You want to go to the mall? What's wrong with you? What? I need $5. I gotta go to the mall. Come on. I don't have enough fucking gas. Like, what I mean? What is this with this guy? I literally used to speak just like De Niro, and I don't anymore. Obviously, I know how to like move my mouth in such a way that I can actually say the letter R.
Yeah,
like, that was very difficult it actually used to hurt my face. Like I would remember like learning how to say the letter R, going, ow, and my jaw would like tighten up. It was hilarious. It's a very, very lazy mouth accent. So, but that's very cool. I didn't know that about the show, but I'm not surprised at all. And having grown up and all that, and like and the hairstyles and all of it. And I grew up in a suburban New York upstate enclave that was literally like it was the DeFelicis and the Luongos and the Cantalmos and the this one and that one, the Nardos, and like the whole. It was you were either Irish or you were Italian. There was the odd Jew, and they were all cops and firemen.
Yeah, sure.
That would commute to the city every day. My dad was a cop. The Mr. Cantalma, he was a fireman. This guy was, the Mr. Cologne was he worked in the transit authority. Like, like that was just the way it was. Like that, it was the whole thing. Like, and it was just, it was, and Italians and Irish like getting together and not fighting in New York.
That's
it was
something.
Impressive. It was impressive.
I apologize for derailing. I did have a follow-up question, but Nathan, I know you had a few you wanted to ask. Did you want to?
Well, even jumping back to this idea of like, because it seems to me like Canada is being pushed or played to be against the U.S. That there's a they that's essentially moving them. We talked about Europe and the Davos crowd as well too. And so I was wondering if you could basically expand upon who are the players at the table right now, and ultimately why are they making these moves and what are they trying to accomplish?
Well, Yeah. So again, go back to what I just said about Rump Europe and physical collateral. They have a financial system that is on the verge of collapse. It's actually already collapsing. And when you're going to collapse, and they always go through this, like once they reach to a point where the debt can't be paid anymore, then you have to get rid of the debt. You wipe the debt out. Usually you go to war, you wipe the debt out, wipe the slate clean, you win the war, you get the collateral from the physical collateral from winning the war, the new territory or area or whatever. You roll that up, and then you use that to issue new debt into the monetary and into a new monetary system. That's what we do every so often. The problem is this time for Davos is that they failed in Russia because the Russians understand how to beat this game because they've survived Napoleon and they survived the Bolsheviks and they survived World War II and they survived the Cold War. And the Chinese said no because they took all of our capital that they were extracting from the United States during the dollar reserve system, the age of the dollar reserve system, and dumping it into China, thinking that they were going to be able to buy the Chinese government over there. The oligarchs raise Xi up to power. Xi keeps the capital account closed, starts collapsing all of their investments, and then puts Davos's money at the back of the line during all of the liquidations. And so I always take a very, it's a FYI as an aside, I always take a very skeptical view of anybody who tells me that China's collapsing. Because sometimes I think that China's property market is collapsed on purpose in order to destroy and wipe out the capital that was invested in China that's of a Western nature. Wow. This is why George Soros is called Xi the devil on multiple occasions. And so I'm always skeptical of the guys that I can easily map to being either CIA or MI6 assets in the financial space telling me that, China's about to collapse and, Xi's going to be out of power and everything's going to be great. I'm like, yeah, what a shock. What you're really saying is that you work for Paul Singer or one of these other vulture capitals who put billions of dollars into China and he can't get a dollar out of the place. And he wasn't able to use that, and they weren't able to get the political control that they needed to then take the country over from within. They were on the verge of doing that under Yeltsin after the Soviet Union fell, and then Putin was elevated by the oligarchs, placed into power to stop all that. He, jailed Khodorkovsky, nationalized Yukos. They're still butthurt about that, by the way, 25 years later. But China was supposed to be the next place after they got done destroying the United States, and they were well on their way to destroying the United States. So that's their play, okay? And when you watch the United States act against its own best interests, doing stupid shit like the global war on terror or any of the things that we've done, like Obamacare, like the ruinous, the fiscal spending, all of that stuff. None of that stuff is structural. None of that is because the United States is just corrupt. Yeah, it's corrupt because it's actually being run by traitors. Well, has been run by traitors. Okay. And it's been that way for a long, long time. The American deep state is not American. These people aren't working for us. Now, some of them are just, transnational globalists that they're corrupted from within, just like you have them in City of London, just like you have them all over Europe, just like you have some of them in Singapore and Hong Kong, Zurich, yada, yada, all the way around the world. And it's that network of people that traces its roots back to the old Dutch and Venetian banking system. That when that's what we call Davos. That's what is in John Wick terms, that's the high table, folks. Right? That's who the high table is in John Wick, by the way. And that metaphor is like completely obvious if you're not. You just watch John Wick and go, oh yeah, yeah, okay, I see it now. And so the but that's their play. That's what they're doing. That's why they hate Donald Trump. It's why they hate all the nationalists or all the populists. It's why they hate Putin. It's why they hate Xi. It's why they hate Viktor Orban. It's why they hate Georgia Meloni. It's why they hate Kalin Georgescu. It's why they hate Vucic. It's why they hate Fisto. But you'll notice that 3 years ago, it was just Trump and Putin and maybe the Brexit crew. Now it's a dozen people. Now it's MBS in Saudi Arabia. Now it's Erdogan in Turkey. Now it's all the people I just named, Marine Le Pen in France, to add to the group. Why do they hate Geert Wilders? Why in the Netherlands? Why do they hate Alice Weidel and the AfD in Germany? It's everywhere, and they're multiplying like mushrooms after in bullshit after a rain. Well, because Davos ultimately is nothing but shit. So, and that's what we're dealing with. And those people have to be destroyed. You don't destroy them directly. Their tentacles are everywhere. Their relationships are centuries old, right? And their banking relationships are centuries old. A lot of the capital that they move around doesn't move through centralized clearinghouses. We can't track this within regulated markets because it doesn't exist. This money doesn't move in regulated markets.
I was gonna say, if not through the capital houses, how are they moving it around then?
There's just private banking relationships, like what we would call the shadow banking system, and as a catch-all phrase. But again, the most profound thing someone ever said to me was, real bankers don't have Wikipedia pages.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So that's the hard part. You don't ever see, this is one of the things I was talking to Stormy Waters about for my podcast, which I haven't put out yet, but it's we don't see the power itself. We see the reflection of power. We see the actions of heads of state or of CEOs or boards, of corporate boards, acting against their own best interests or acting against their people's best interests. They take the opprobrium of the people and we get mad at them, and we miss the fact that they're being ordered to do what they're doing. Okay. The clearest example of this I can give, and this is where I had my epiphany about this. I always kind of realized that it was like this, but it became really obvious to me when I identified it in my own behavior. And I remember getting really pissed off during like 2016, 2017, 2018 to Jack Dorsey over Twitter. Right? Because Jack Dorsey was quote unquote, he was the CEO and Twitter was instituting all these rules and deplatforming people and everything else. But Jack Dorsey was a patsy. The board at Twitter controlled the company. Completely filled to the gills with Sorosites, Davos guys, members of the World Economic Forum, yada, 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 who themselves are a layer of, they're just colonels. If Jack Dorsey is, a second lieutenant being forced to, charge the fucking the machine gun nest with his platoon, then Klaus Schwab is the freaking colonel issuing the orders. But the real generals are nowhere to be. We don't even know their names. You think the Rothschilds are the guys actually in charge? You're kind of crazy. Like, they're also just another, like, the James Bond movies in some ways are actually truer than you think they are. Because it's always about these shady financiers and these shady weapons dealers that nobody knows anything about, but only MI6 needs to know anything about. That part of it is bullshit. MI6 has actually created those guys, right? Or works for those guys. They're not working against those guys. Those guys exist, so they're everywhere. So the only way to beat those people is you have to force them out of the shadows. The way you force them out of the shadows is you take away their engine of their profit engine. And their profit engine is using our currencies and our debt and our debt-based monetary system. It's their cash flow. They're the ones who are sitting on the piles of assets around the world, constantly generating money, which they use to buy U.S. treasuries, to then pull another 4% return on. That's a claim against our labor. Okay. So how do you beat those people? Well, it's when I identified, years ago. So to finish the Jack Dorsey story, Jack Dorsey was the guy we all got angry with when he wasn't the guy in charge of the company.
Yeah, I think it was very apparent. If you remember the Rogan and Tim Pool interview, and I feel like they made him take the lawyer with him, like he had no choice. Like, she has to come and sit at the table as well too. Yeah. And again, I could be just reading into what I want to because he's a Bitcoiner as well too. But it felt like a guy that was taken hostage and apologetic for it.
Yes, it felt that way.
That was a struggle session. That was absolutely a struggle session, a classic communist struggle session. And Rogan and Tim Pool were trying to help Jack Dorsey out of that moment, and the board was forcing. Oh, you're absolutely no, Nathan's a brilliant to bring that up, because that was exactly for me. I think it was actually the moment when I started to realize, no, Dorsey's. I need to stop reacting to what I'm seeing and start reacting to what's real, and see beyond it. Now, I've always been able to see beyond, but I finally was able to get my anger over Twitter because they had me, as a doctrinaire libertarian, they had me triggered on that because free speech.
100%.
I mean, to be honest with you, the evolution of Gold, Ghosts, and Guns as a Patreon service is thanks to Jack Dorsey, because we started a private Slack discussion server for all the people who were afraid of getting in my orbit. Who, at that time, there weren't many people that were worried about free speech. So we created a private server on Slack to just chat amongst ourselves, right? Well, guess what? It's now a core asset of Gold, Ghosts, and Guns, because it's added in. I gave it to all the subscribers for free. Well, not for free, but as part of what I was already giving them. And I'm like, I'll just give them that as well. And now it's turned into this hive mind that keeps me informed on a day-to-day basis. It keeps me challenged on a day-to-day basis. So, I mean, it's funny how these things work out over time, right? So, so where we are today is we're at a moment where we have in the United States, for the first time, a powerful nation. We actually have three powerful nations. We have China, Russia, and the United States, all powerful in different ways. Right. The Russians have completely jacked out of the old system. They're out of SWIFT. They don't own any U.S. Treasury bonds. They have a private banking relationship with China. They're building relationships all across, direct relationships, economic relationships all across Central Asia. They're doing diplomacy all across Central Asia. They've got means by which to interact and still sell all their goods around the world without having to interact with the U.S. dollar system at all if they do not want to. You have the Chinese, who still have a closed capital account and one of the largest economies, at least in terms of nominal GDP in the entire world. And they can control how wealth moves across the border, in and out of the country. And then we had the last one. We have the globalist compromise, but yet incredibly powerful United States with the dollar that serves as the world's global reserve currency and unit of account and dominant trade settlement currency, but who was never, up until very recently, in control of its own monetary or fiscal policy. And so now that to make a long story short, we're gaining control over fiscal policy because we've gotten control over monetary policy. The first thing you had to do was get control of monetary policy. And the problem for most people that they won't understand is that the U.S. was never really in control of the value of the dollar when we were on LIBOR. LIBOR is the London Interbank Offer Rate. LIBOR set the price of dollars around the world, including inside the United States.
Huh.
Okay? Because all of our debt contracts, our credit cards, our car loans, our credit revolvers, our corporate paper, all of that stuff was quoted as a function of LIBOR. Certainly, 30-day paper and 7-day paper and short-term interest rates and everything else. And so if that market started to seize up, it would force the Federal Reserve to alter monetary policy as a function of what was happening in what's known as the Eurodollar, or the offshore dollar market. Mm-hmm. So the offshore dollar market was enforcing the par value of the dollar onto the Fed, when the Fed should be enforcing the par value of the dollar onto the rest of the world. That reversed during Trump 1.0, when we started the process of moving off of LIBOR to the secured overnight financing rate, which is known as today as SOFR. And SOFR is an interest rate that is quoted on a day-to-day basis of what happens in the U.S. monetary money and repo markets. And that is a market rate. It's collateralized, unlike LIBOR, which is just an uncollateralized rate that, 18 London bankers got together at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and went, 5.125%. Right? Now it's whatever the market says it is. So if London starts to get into trouble, London can't call up and move the price on LIBOR up to 25 or 30 basis points to help cover their problem. Or worse than that, move it up 200 basis points to force the Fed into cutting its rates, into a cutting cycle early. So invariably what happens is the Fed would start to raise rates when the United States economy would overheat, and so it would start to raise rates in order to pull things back under control and cut back on money issuance, because it didn't need it, and to try and keep inflation under control. So what would happen? When that happened is they started to raise rates, because the Eurodollar system is more leveraged than the domestic U.S. economy is. LIBOR would start to blow out to the upside, and demand for dollars would start to rise very quickly, because they needed to service all the debt issued in the previous cycle, and they can't afford to have the Fed funds rate at 5%. They needed it at 3.5%. So, but because so LIBOR would start to blow out, demand for money would rise, people would be starting willing to bid for US dollars overseas, 5, 6, 7%. What happened now? Your credit cards went from 12.99% to 17%. Your adjustable rate mortgage went up by 300 basis points. You went to go buy a new car, and last month they were quoting you, $499 for a 48-month loan, and now they're quoting you $799 on a 48-month loan. Or they have to, so then you'd have to go out in time with 60 months or 72 months and everything else. And so what would happen? It would engender a recession here at home, and the Fed would have to cut rates before it was done flushing out the malinvestment from the previous cycle, which which validates the whole Austrian business cycle argument side of the argument. Great, but it doesn't. But who is it serving? It's serving offshore dollar needs: Hong Kong, London, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, all those guys. Singapore, not us in the United States. And so slowly, as every one of these cycles happens, every monetary cycle happens, our economy gets hollowed out more and more and more, and they keep getting all the money. What do we do on Capitol Hill? Well, we're good Keynesians. We're supposed to countercyclically spend into the recession. So we up the amount of G in the GDP number and then the whole thing, and it just keeps ballooning out of fucking control. That reverses itself under SOFR. Now, Powell raises rates to 5.5%, and the American economy doesn't crash. Yeah. Now all of a sudden, Peter Schiff looks like an idiot. Now all of a sudden, every dollar bearer in the world looks like a moron. Mouth-breathing moron with 2 teeth. And they still have jobs, these people. It amazes me. Because you think about it like, no, you were wrong. You said the Fed would get the 1% and the economy would crash and to be right back down to the zero bound. Never happened. They went to 5.5%, even raised rates during a banking crisis. March of 2023, raised rates during a banking crisis. Worst banking crisis since 2008. Raised interest rates 25 basis points in the middle of it. Why? Because he could. As a flex to let everybody know, I am in control of this. We control our capital markets, not you. You get to deal with it. And it forced Christine Lagarde at the ECB into 3 years with the yield curve control. It forced Janet Yellen, who's a fucking traitor, into issuing 1 and 2 year notes which is what we're dealing with now with the whole debt rollover, all of this stuff. It's all tied to trying to save Europe. Every bit of it. It's all to serve the high cable and not serve the United States. So, SOFR's the law of the land, folks. It's far more powerful than all of this stuff. So what it's doing is it's draining the leverage in the offshore dollar markets and forcing them to put their real money on the table. All that capital and all that wealth that they stole over the last 400 years is having to be dumped onto the table in order to keep the system solvent. They're part of the system solving. That's what's happening right now. And Mark Carney is an expression of, and Mark Carney wanting to effectively liquidate Canada into this is part of that game as well. In short time, I can go on for half an hour to explain some of the mechanics.
Oh, I believe you.
Yeah.
No, but essentially,
this is new for you, isn't it?
No, it's an education. I'm sitting here. I have so many questions, but I know Nathan wants to follow up.
I'll let you get in there, Gary, in a second. I apologize, but I want to ask them. So when we're talking about the end of central banking era, is that kind of what you're seeing in the sense that these moves with the switch from LIBOR to SOFR is ultimately going to cause basically a credit contraction in the Eurodollar system that would basically call everybody's bluff? It's already happening.
It's already happening. Yeah, it's already happening in every way, and that's why. And that's why they hate Trump. That's why every move that Trump makes, when you look at it from this perspective, I didn't believe that Trump was like hip to any of this stuff, any of it. When, he was running for office last year, I'm like, well, if he comes back, if we get some good stuff, even if he just goes after his enemies, that'd be good enough, because by proxy, he'll come in like a bull in a china shop and blow up a lot of people who deserve to be blown up. But it won't be with any kind of strategic acumen, right? Either somebody in the Trump administration is listening to me and the people in my circle, or they actually are even smarter than I am, which is what I expect. That's the reality. I'm actually just a reflection of what I'm seeing from them. I certainly don't think that I'm leading anything here. I just think I'm reading the data that's in front of me with the right strategic framework. Once you get the right strategic framework, then it's in many ways, if that works for you, if that continues to check out, then you know that you can use that as a foundation for all your future analysis. It's look, I'm a scientist. At the end of the day, I used to be a chemist. Like I know how to write experiment protocols. I know how to test, and I know how to test variables. I know how to reject. I know how to test for the null hypothesis. I know how to do this stuff. I've been doing this shit my entire life. So, and that's the way I approach a lot of this stuff. And if I was wrong about any of this stuff, I would say, "No, I was wrong about that." And that means, but since I was wrong about that, that means like everything else. That means you can now eliminate that and now start to look at where you were right, right? Because that's what science is. It's not about creating consensus. It's about rejecting that which is untrue in order to get you closer to what is true, even though you'll never reach true because Zeno's paradox is still operative. Right.
It's a method. It's not somebody in a lab coat and glasses.
Right. This is scientific. Science is the scientific method, and falsification and positivism has its uses. It is not the end all and be all of human inquisition. Let's just get 100%. Rid of that shit right now for all of you trust the science morons in the audience. And maybe there are some of you out there, and if you are and you're offended by my voice, good. Like seriously, good. This is the wake up call. A priori is important. That's how you create hypotheses. Mm-hmm. The positivism is how you test hypotheses. You cannot take the testing protocol and make it the philosophical underpinnings of your worldview. Doesn't work that way. You can't backtrack an ethos from again, are you Canadian or are you not American? Same problem.
Yeah, 100%.
So, where were we?
I was saying, I have so many questions, but I'll give Gary a chance to jump in here too. Go for it, buddy.
Well, I mean, there's just so much to unpack, and I can tell you that for years, I was always, you said you're a libertarian. I used to work for a congressman in DC, and I was always kind of like the token libertarian in the office. And part of it came with a bit of natural skepticism. People would send me letters. I'd see letters all the time from constituents with all sorts of different conspiracy theories. And I'd say up until recently, I wasn't much of a conspiracy theory guy, if only because of the whole Occam's razor thing. Like, a conspiracy takes a lot of people to keep their mouth shut, and the odds of that happening are like really, really long. So I was always the skeptic on that. And yet in the last, year or two, I've been, opening my mind more and more to that. But what you've been talking about just seems like an entire level that I've never even considered. I mean, you're talking like Hail Hydra type stuff, a
lot of the, Gary, you're not wrong. Like I'm not saying that it's like, I don't think it's a big conspiracy. Right? Okay. I think it's a lot of people with their own interests, and it's a system that has been running on autopilot. In many ways, it runs on autopilot, and it has its tentacles everywhere. But you see the reflections of it all over the place. It's the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was was making you believe it didn't exist. Right. Well, that's the big one. The term conspiracy theorist was created in the bowels of fucking Quantico or Langley. Sorry, I always get Quantico and Langley. They did it on purpose in order to discredit that what they were actually doing. We have intelligence operatives out there. We live in a world of overlapping psyops. They're very good at what they do. They've got us all mapped psychologically. They've got AIs running on us all day long. Right? And we want to believe incompetence is more operative than malice, because
I was going to ask you about that. Go on, yes,
because it makes us sleep better at night.
Yeah. Because there is that idea.
I used to always be on the side of, I would always go through the process. I want to believe in malice, but let me go through the incompetence thing first. When I was a hardcore libertarian, I would do that because it was easier. But I also always had it in the back of my head that there are people out there trying to put their thumb on the scale. Like,
fair.
I've never called these people like the Davos crowd, what I would call the Davos crowd. I've never used the term the people who run the world. I don't use that phrase. I use the phrase the people who think they run the world.
Okay.
Okay. So
fair.
They have the ability to go and influence things and make things happen, but that doesn't mean they're actually in control of anything. Let's talk about the Romanian elections that happened yesterday.
Ooh, tell me more.
First round of Romanian elections back a couple months ago, Kalin Georgescu comes out of nowhere, the populists, to say, no, war with Ukraine. No, we don't want the big doubling of the NATO base to start an air war against Crimea 2 years from now. No, we don't want any of that. Well, he was the beneficiary of $10,000 worth of Russian propaganda. Therefore, he can't be president. So what happens yesterday?
I don't know.
Their candidate came in third. And another populist took his place and won the vote. And then the conservative guy squeaked out a second place victory, squeaked out second place over the Davos approved third place guy. Like, it doesn't matter. The Romanians are like, we're not living under communism. I don't care if it has a German accent or a Russian accent. It doesn't matter. Okay, we're not doing this. I don't care. We don't want to be ruled by France, by French or Germans. It's not happening. We didn't like it the first time we were ruled by the Germans, and we didn't like being ruled by the Russians. We're Romanian. It's over. And now what are they going to do? Are they going to invalidate this election as well? Are they going to rerun this election? They can keep making them vote until they get it right. I mean, eventually they had to back off on Brexit originally, but that's only because the Queen was behind Brexit, and because Trump was coming to power. They've since, almost basically reversed Brexit since then. It's the same kind of thing. Like they will eventually they'll accept what happens in Romania. Then they'll put the screws to Romania in other ways after these guys take power, because nothing will be allowed to change. But
I got to jump in because there was something you said kind of in passing that just really struck me as key and important. Like, why do we see this in Romania and not in Canada? You said that we're Romanian. Like, you immediately just intuitively threw out that they have a sense of identity and how that was critical to them being able to reject what was going on and the pressures that were being put upon them.
Well, I think like I look at, I've been to Alberta twice now. The last 2 years, Sean Newman has been very gracious and brought me up there 2 years ago for an evening to just chat with Alex Craner. And then last year we did the first Cornerstone. And now we're going to Calgary this upcoming weekend, and we're going to do it again. Bigger event, bigger thing. Looks very cool. I'm hoping that it is as successful as the first two attempts up there.
I'll be there.
I'm looking forward to it. We'll shake hands. We'll smoke a cigar. We'll drink a rye. We'll do the thing. So, what's important is that I felt it then when I went up there 2 years ago, and I'm feeling it now. Albertans have an ethos. They do. They know what they are. And they're not going to say, we're not Laurentian elite. They know what they are. They're Albertans. And, I have it on good authority that the people in the wilds of British Columbia outside of Vancouver are that way. And I believe that the guys in Saskatchewan are the same way. Like there's and so I don't know that they necessarily have to see themselves as Canadian anymore. They're beginning to see themselves as Albertan in the same way that at some point during this whole America, when they were deracinating America, right? And we were really worried last year as to whether or not Trump was going to come back to power. And even then, I was theorizing then. I'm like, well, if Trump wins, then the blue states are going to try and secede from the red states, and if he loses, then the red states are going to have to secede from the blue states. That's what they were setting up for us, and they were trying to figure out a way to set that up. And I kept saying, well, everybody better get used to calling themselves Floridian. And Florida has an ethos, folks, and it ain't Disneyland. Not where I live in Florida. Let me tell you. Okay. I live 25 miles north of Gainesville. Like, ain't no blue hairs where I live. I live in the most red county in all of Florida. We voted in Columbia County. We voted 80-20 Trump.
Wow. I read an amusing thing a few years back. Somebody said
81-19, actually, I think.
The farther north in Florida you go, the more in the south you are.
Yeah. That is exactly correct. Until you get it. I actually have a patron who's a very much an unreconstructed Southerner, and I say that with all love and respect, by the way. And he said, "Tom, you don't live in North Florida, my friend. You live in Southern Georgia." and I'm 90, and I'm like on 90 or 100 miles inside of the Florida border. I mean, Valdosta is a good hour and a half north of me, and Florida's a big state with a lot of subcultures, but Florida has a culture all of its own and an ethos all of its own. And even then, I go to South Florida and it's a very interesting mix. It's a big mix of, New Yorkers and Michiganites and native Floridians and everything else. And at the end of the day, though, we're Florida. And I love the fact that they've tried to meme into existence that Florida man is some weird dude. And everybody's like, no, Florida man is like the most based motherfucker on the planet because he's out there like rescuing his dog with a cigar in one hand and, pulling the dogs out of the alligator's mouth with the other and not losing his cigar. That's Florida man. There's a certain love to that. And yes, there's a certain love to the crazies that live in Florida too. And we just like, oh yeah, that's just Jerry. You can't, there's pockets of shit liberty and then there's Florida and, mostly the university towns. And then, but even as, the longer that they import other cultures into Florida to try and turn it purple, bringing the Puerto Ricans into Orlando and to bring the Cubans into Miami and this and everything else. At the end of the day, the longer they stay here, the more based they become. Like Florida is so not blue, it's not funny. Like once we cleared up our elections, Florida is no longer a purple state. It's not even close. Florida is like plus 10 red, folks. And it gets more and more based every day. The college towns are what they are. Gainesville's a lost cause. Tallahassee's a lost cause. But other than that, like it's all good. But we'll set up I'll be happy if we had to. We'd set up a little thing on the border, I-95 and I-75 and 301. Like you ain't coming in. Say the pledge. What's the pledge? Lincoln was a tyrant.
Yeah.
Oh no, you can't. No, you want not willing to pay that. You want to say that? That's fine. We're going to get rid of DeSantis wants to get rid of property tax down here. Ooh. And you know why you go into why he wants to get rid of property tax? It's not about the fact that we don't need the money. It's the fact that the property values have gotten so out of control, and because we tax based, the school boards get a percentage. They get a millage rate based on the value of the property. So these freaking like school boards are flush with money in ways that you would not freaking believe. This is an attack on the whole DEI educational complex and the freaking commies that have taken over the educational complex. That's why he wants to get rid of property tax in Florida. And by the way, we're still so well managed, we can get rid of residential property tax in Florida, and we'd still have more than enough money to build all the roads we need to handle the influx of population.
I've always hated property taxes because it's basically just an unrealized capital gains tax, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's the original sin of government. You don't own your property, you own it. O-W''N. You owe on it in perpetuity to the government.
God, I have so many things I want to ask. I want to ask about how this relates to Bitcoin. Obviously, it's a Bitcoin podcast, but something you mentioned earlier, and Nate, sorry if I'm jumping in on something you were going to ask.
We'll talk about Bitcoin because I love Bitcoin.
Okay, I have a specific question, then I have a couple general questions. But the specific question is, you talked about earlier how the Davos crowd hates nationalists, and I guess I wonder, was there any impetus beyond Steve Bannon himself that got Steve Bannon ousted in Trump's first term? Because he very much seems the antithesis of the nationalist crowd.
Yeah, no, Steve Bannon.
Not just the Davos crowd. Right?
Steve Bannon's problem is that I don't know. I'm not gonna. I don't know what I should and shouldn't say without getting into libel. I have an opinion about Steve Bannon, and all I'm going to say is that once Navy intelligence, always Navy intelligence.
Okay, interesting.
Okay,
yeah. And I'm not asking it as if I'm a specific fan of the guy or not. I'm just curious because I know
I'm not a fan of Steve Bannon either, and I like the whole There's something about Bannon and his, I don't know, like there's that whole wing of the Republican Party that is kind of is trying to push Trump into a war with China is an issue. Because one of the problems, I think, in some ways, maybe you can argue it this way, and it's hard to say, and I'm just going to like speculate here. This is not. I don't even have an opinion here. I'm going to say some things now that I don't even believe.
Yeah, I'm just now working out on air.
Now I'm just throwing it out. Now this is what I do, by the way.
Sure.
Which is the following: Bannon's obsession with China makes him try to, in a sense, he's trying to push Trump into a conflict with China to ignore the high table, to ignore Davos.
Oh.
Is that what's going on? Because remember, it was MI6 that was instrumental in Russiagate. Everything about Russiagate went through an MI6 operative.
Okay.
Went through Steele and Bill Browder and all these people who are all MI6, either ex-MI6 or current MI6 or MI6 in name only. Browder, of course, has always been MI6, by the way. And if you don't know who Bill Browder is, you need to do some freaking homework because he's the most important player in all of this. Is how we got the Magnitsky Act and targeted sanctions and this, that, and everything else. All of it. He was there. He was there with with the killing of Ben Safra, like the framing of Yeltsin, the Yukos, it's all downstream. Browder was on the ground in the 90s with suitcases full of dollars to go buy up all the Russian stocks, Gazprom and Rosneft, as they were being privatized and all. I mean, it was just egregious. That guy is as dirty as the day is long. He's been, and so 90% of Russiagate went directly through the bowels of MI6. Gina Haspel was put in charge of the CIA to make sure that none of that came to light. Like, she was running cover for everybody. Trump was in occupied territory in the first term, and Congress and the Senate didn't give him anything, and no one wanted to work for him, and he couldn't get anybody. He didn't know the powers of the president in order to actually do his job, so they were able to ring fence him very, very easily. In the intervening 4 years, he's come back with a staff who knows exactly what to do and how to operate within up to the limit of, and even just over the limit of presidential authority, and then force the moment to its crisis point, which is what he's doing right now, and it's all part of the strategy. Bannon got himself thrown out of the Trump administration. I'm going to speculate because at some point Trump finally figured out that he was working for that part of the administration and of the American deep state that wanted war with China for Davos's purposes of weakening China and the United States at the same time for them to get into China. That would be my argument. And I don't know that it's a real one.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Is Trump that insightful, though?
Isn't that fascinating that people don't want to believe that about him?
Because I don't want to believe that about him. And I'm no Democrat or Trump's the devil or anything.
I mean, on this front, I used to have TDS.
Okay.
I never wanted to give Trump this kind of credit.
Okay.
But 4 years of persecution to the point where they nearly bankrupted him and everything that they've done to him and everything that he's seen in the last 8 years. And then they finally took a shot at him and they missed. I don't believe that he understood a lot of this stuff, but his winning in 2016 opened the door for all the things that we talked about. SOFR, LIBOR, because look, Jerome Powell is elevated and to FOMC chair in February of 2017, and then Trump immediately nominates John Williams to the head of the all-powerful New York Fed. John Williams being the architect of SOFR, the guy who wrote the fucking paper.
And composed Star Wars, so he's very talented.
Well, yeah, and whom I share a birthday with, by the way. That's like one of the great things. One of the few things I really am proud of in my life is I was born on the same day as John Williams. So because musician first, all this other shit second, and going all the way back to when I was 9 years old, 10 years old, and wore out, I think, 2 copies of the original soundtrack on vinyl. Oh yeah, I used to listen to it all the time. So. But John Williams is the head of the New York Fed and a very powerful New York Fed, and he's the architect and the implementer of SOFR. Those things happened in the first 6 weeks of the Trump administration, the 5-year rollout to get SOFR from pilot program into its current state as the law of the land and the law of the world now effectively. That happens, and Trump doesn't even know what's going on, I don't think. And I firmly believe that he was allowed to come into power Or maybe they did steal the election for him in 2016 in order to make sure that he did come to power. And Hillary Clinton wasn't lying, but it wasn't the Russians that did it. It was the sovereigntist wing of the DOD and Wall Street and the intelligence services that did it. Or he just won the election and they saw the opportunity to use him as a vessel to get done what needed to get done as the foundation. While he's out there like being Mr. Chaos, they're getting all this infrastructure laid to fundamentally change the way the world operates. Because you understand that the shift from LIBOR to SOFR is a fundamental shift in how the world moves all the money. Because we price dollars, not them. And the dollar is the world's dominant currency. And then everything about the dollar is going to go the way of the dodo and the this and the that in the United States. It's all psyop. Because we're still in a dominant market, and it's still in a dominant market position. Why? I didn't want to believe this. I used to be, I'm still, in many ways, I'm still a dollar bear. I'm still a gold guy. I'm still a Bitcoin guy, still a hard money guy. But reality is that market share matters. Covenants matter. Investment prospectuses matter. Fund prospectuses matter. Insurance companies have rules of what they're allowed to and what they're not allowed to invest in. These things matter. And they matter more to money flow than your math or your logic, which is why I yell at Bitcoin maxis all the time. Guys, you're not wrong, but you're not right. You're right in theory, you're wrong in practice. Because in practice, if the people who are the stewards of the dollar, I've said this many times and I'll say it again. And I'll say it slowly so that this time that everybody gets it.
Please do a Bitcoin maxi. Go slow.
Bitcoin was birthed as an antipode, as an oppositional force to a dollar that was being fundamentally betrayed, to a financial system that did not work for people. It was designed, and it was birthed into a situation where the dollar was being betrayed by the very people who were its stewards. And it operated and grew like you wouldn't fucking believe, brilliantly, while that was going on. While we had Bernanke and we had Yellen destroying the dollar, and Congress destroying the country, and by extension, the dollar reserve system. Well, the dollar reserve system was over by the time the dollar reserve system ended in 2008. We were in the coordinated central bank policy era up until 2022. And then Powell started raising rates and that was all over. Okay. Once Powell started tightening the offshore dollar markets, that system was over. And now we're in the breakdown period. Now notice what's happening. Bitcoin is great because Bitcoin is being brought into the financial system in order to be another node of collateral that has no counterparty risk, just like gold. That's its primary function. But Bitcoin as a thing operated beautifully as an antipode to this system where the Fed wasn't defending its own product. No Bitcoin maxi I ever talked to ever considered the idea when they said, Bitcoin's going to will, it's going to rule, it's going to win, it's just math. And I said, okay, great. Have you ever considered what happens when Bitcoin has to operate in a world where the Fed actually defends itself? The Fed has market share. Like you wouldn't believe. Trillions and trillions of dollars of market share and ability to control the plumbing and everything else. Can the Fed co-opt and use Bitcoin to reinforce the dollar? Oh, you betcha. And what does that world look like? And is that just now to the Bitcoin maxis? That's just an interim period until we get to the Bitcoin standard. Maybe you're correct. But how long is that period going to be? Is it going to be long enough for you to be able to act on? Is it going to be long? Is it going to be short enough that you can act on it and you can plan your life around it? Or are you still going to have to buy T-bills at 5.5% in order to put your kids through college and buy your son the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu fucking grip? Because this is the real world you have to live in, where you have to make investment decisions today, not 30 years from now. This is not to say you shouldn't stack sats, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. Of course. It also means you shouldn't shit on Tether, because without Tether, there's no Bitcoin liquidity. You shouldn't shit on Ripple, because Ripple gets to be the friggin' new Forex and takes all this power away from the City of London, which still settles 30% of the world's Forex, which we pay a princely sum between 3 and 8% to do, which Ripple can handle for pennies in seconds. Not to say that I'm a big fan of Ripple, or the possibility of Ripple like stealing everybody's thunder, or are they compromised, or they work for the high table, they work for this. I don't fucking know. I just know what's happening. What's happening is that it's being brought in and to be another foundational block in a new financial system. What's the stablecoin bill? The stablecoin bill is literally, as I had Caitlin Long on my podcast, another big Bitcoiner, huge Bitcoiner, Caitlin Long, Custodia Bank, like the whole thing. She's like, the stablecoin bill is through Tether, is going to bring the U.S. Treasury market to places in the dark places of the world that we could never figure out how to bank. But that's what Tether's doing right now.
Tether's also got 21 capital as well too. So Tether's taking both sides. I said Tether's also backing the 21 capital, the new Jack Mallers venture. So they're taking both sides of that trade.
They're taking all sides of all trades. They're issuing a friggin' gold Tether. They're issuing and they've got kiosks and allow people to bank and save, and like it's happening. And guess what? It's all backed by U.S. Treasuries, all backed by T-bills. Some of it's backed by gold. It's got a little Bitcoin on their balance sheet, got a little gold on their balance sheet, got some long-term treasuries, mostly got short-term treasuries. You know what they don't have on their balance sheets? German bunds. You know what they don't have on their balance sheets? Canadian dollar debt.
Yeah.
Because the very idea of Tether putting Canadian dollar debt on their balance sheet is laughable. Why? No one wants the Canadian dollar. They all want dollars. No, and people don't want Bitcoin. I mean, they want Bitcoin, but they want Bitcoin as collateral for all of those trades. Because what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin then, as with the U.S. Treasury's proxy, is literally collateralizing SOFR. Now, in the end, are we going to get rid of the U.S. Treasury and just go directly to Bitcoin on a Lightning Network or something? I don't know. I don't know. I don't care. I mean, I do care, but I don't care. What I care about is that having Bitcoin as collateral, in the same way as you really remonetizing gold as collateral, as a tier 1 capital asset under Basel III, you have those two things. What are they doing? They're reducing the leverage in the system. All this shit that we bitched about, the whole reason we became Bitcoiners in the first place. Bring the leverage down, folks. Get closer to sound money with a good hard collateral underpinning of our markets, with admittedly a lot of I would argue necessary temporary liquidity that's created in the market in order to liquefy trade because of the time mismatch that exists between payments and production, which goes right back to von Mises and the theory of money and credit. It's just like the credit's going to take a different form.
Okay, I got to jump in because I'm curious on this too.
There's a big Bitcoin rant for you. Like I'm trying to.
I'll get more.
I'm trying to I mean this with all the love in the world. I would like to be a Bitcoin maxi, but I don't have time to care about the theory. I like to. I used to think in that term. If I had thought in those terms 10 years ago, I would have never sold a Bitcoin. I would have never allowed my original Bitcoins to get stolen. And you and I wouldn't even be talking anyway, because I have so many freaking Bitcoins that have a freaking private island somewhere and getting blown by the Cabana Girl. Okay? Because I literally had something like 200. I sold 220 Bitcoins for a video card for 220 Bitcoins at one point in my life.
Oh.
They got stolen I got stolen by a keylogger for a guy looking for my World of Warcraft password and got my Mt. Gox password instead.
Oh my God.
When they were $2.
Well, now you're stuck talking to us, Tom. So it worked out for me, but terrible for you.
I mean, let me put it this way: my life is actually infinitely improved because I lost all my Bitcoins.
I mean, if you dye the beard, I'll consider the BJ, but you got to come out with a little bit more than that.
I'm
not going to stand up and teabag the camera.
Okay. Jumping back for 1 second, then too. With that, It kind of sounds like, but I could be wrong. Are you kind of on the same boat as like Brent Johnson with the dollar milkshake theory, then thinking that like something like gold, Bitcoin, and dollars could all rise in value? And caveat to that, then, if that's the case, wouldn't that mean that continuing to onshore manufacturing back to the U.S. would be extremely difficult or impossible as the dollar value continues to rise?
Yes and no. Depends on what you're talking about, because ultimately the dollar is going to have a par value that's domestic and a par value that's international. And the international dollar is not going to be able to defend par at their level, meaning the value of the dollar, 1-to-1, dollar for dollar. We can create dollars. We can create preferential dollars that spend here with a higher purchasing power than the dollars that are spent overseas. And therefore, yes, we can bring manufacturing back and we can generate the wealth internally. And the dollars overseas, they could lose value, and the dollar could probably wind up being. I expect the dollar to quote unquote lose its reserve currency status. I don't think our current Fed chairman believes that the reserve currency status of the United States is something that we should be defending. Powell's all but said this multiple times at Humphrey Hawkins testimonies. I believe there's room in the world for more than one reserve currency. Now, was he talking about Bitcoin in the U.S., and dollar and gold? What was he talking about? Was he talking about the Chinese yuan? Was he talking about the Japanese yen? I don't know. It doesn't matter. What he means by that is like, look, this is a privilege that we can't afford to maintain anymore. We don't have to maintain those things, and we can allow the dollar to fluctuate. I mean, again, strong dollar versus what? Okay, there's always a denominator somewhere. Like the dollar can rise versus the euro and rise versus the pound, and still lose to gold and Bitcoin, which is probably what's going to happen. Like, I don't think that the gold bull run is over. I don't think the Bitcoin run is over in any way, manner, shape, or form. I don't think. I don't think any of that is over and done with yet. I don't think we've even begun to get started on all of this stuff yet. I think this is the next phase of it. But we're having a hard time conceiving of a dollar that exists for different markets, because we always considered the global market for dollars to be one thing. Well, who created that system? The globalists. The globalists, like Alex Jones. It's all the globalists. It's not. You know what I mean? God damn it! I can't do it. I can't do Alex Jones. I'd like to, but I also like to keep my vocal cords. So I abuse them enough with these fucking things. So yeah, I mean, I think that that's what I'm focusing on, or not focusing, but that's what I see in the future, is that we can have a digital U.S. dollar that circulates domestically, that's only backed by treasuries or assets held and owned by the U.S. government and by American citizens or American companies. Like, could you imagine, U.S. treasuries are only sold to Americans? Why is that such a radical thought? Like, you have to be an American citizen or an American corporation or American LLC with primary ownership and, with primary American citizen ownership, domiciled in the United States, and they're the only ones who are allowed to own them. And they can't be pledged as collateral in the offshore dollar markets either. The capital controls are going to go up around the United States. And I mean this sincerely. Like, you have to realize that that's where we're headed. But they're going to be soft capital controls in that respect. So that's coming. And part of what Mark Carney, that brings us all the way back to the beginning, what part of what Mark Carney wants to actually do is maintain that ridiculous trade imbalance that we have with Canada, because that's a source of offshore dollar liquidity that can be then levered up, because it's $10 billion a month flowing into the Canadian bank, the Canadian central bank's coffer, which then can be loaned out through the Canadian banking system, which, you guys have, your banks have charters here in the United States, but we're not allowed to have charters over in Canada, which is insane. And, because of that, that's how he's going to then lever those dollars up and then use them to try and help enforce the par value of dollar overseas. It's not going to work. It's not enough money, but it's enough to slow the process down. Because what they're doing in Davos right now is everything is just about extended pretend. Get in the way, stop. It's what you're seeing financially and politically is in the United States right now is no different than the way the Ukrainians are trying to stop the Russians.
Yep. Can't be done.
Like give ground, fight for every inch, and try and hold this off until the cavalry can arrive. And basically, what they're saying, the translation on that is, we're just trying to get to the midterms so that we can seal the midterms, impeach Trump, get rid of him, and start the process over again. I got news for you. All those people who are going to do that are going to wind up in jail. Listen to Tulsi Gabbard very carefully. That interview she just did with Megyn Kelly will tell you what the strategy is there. They're going after all those people. They're going after Act Blue. They're going after all that stuff. And they're going to dismantle all of those things. And at some point, Trump is just going to suspend habeas corpus and start, just like Lincoln, he's going to suspend habeas corpus. It's coming.
I know there's
Lincoln faced the exact same thing. When you reframe the Civil War, or as we like to put it here in the South, is the
war of northern aggression.
No, the recent unpleasantness. You have to.
The recent unpleasantness.
You have to think like a Floridian.
Of course.
But yes, the war to prevent Southern secession, or the war or from Lincoln's perspective, the war to prevent France and Germany from destroying the colonies, recapturing the colonies, which is the other way to look at it.
Yeah.
When you look at it from that perspective, Lincoln is no longer my least favorite president. Herbert Hoover is.
Oh, he sucks.
Hoover or Wilson. Wilson. Sorry, I always get this.
Yeah.
Wilson.
Wilson
1912. I always get Wilson and Hoover because they just bloodless fucking like. They make my bloodless fucking wasp. They make my skin fucking crawl.
Bitcoin gives you back your time, so why not spend it having a blast orange pilling your family and friends with the ultimate Bitcoin board game? Block Hunters is a fast-paced adventure that mirrors how Bitcoin actually works. Anyone from Bitcoin beginner to seasoned hodler can play as one of 10 characters, each highlighting a real-world use case. You'll fill the mempool with transactions, mine like a pro, and fight to fill the block to claim your Bitcoin reward, all while keeping your identity hidden. After all, privacy is important. Block Hunters is a STEM.org authenticated game fostering critical thinking, problem-solving skills, and exploring real-world applications. Turn off the screens and have a 30-minute exciting experience the whole family will enjoy. Remember, Block Hunters isn't just a game. It's your secret weapon to fight misinformation, spark understanding, and lead the charge toward a bright orange future. One play and your friends will be begging to set up a wallet. So what are you waiting for? Grab your copy of Block Hunters today and become the unstoppable Bitcoin evangelist. No preaching required. Head to blockhuntersgame.com by simply scanning the QR code or click the links below. Use promo code BTCMentor for 10% off.
Are you still keeping your Bitcoin on the exchange? Are you confident in your current Bitcoin setup? At Bitcoin Mentor, we've helped hundreds of people level up their security and fast-track their Bitcoin understanding. If you find that you simply don't have time to go through all the tutorials, the books, and the guides, you can book a free strategy session with me by simply scanning the QR code or clicking the link in the description down below. Discover how Ben, Gary, myself, the entire expert team at Bitcoin Mentor can help you accelerate your Bitcoin journey. Simply scan the QR code or head to bitcoinmentor.io to learn more about how we can help you. My question then, Tom, is with all the geopolitical realignment, and we see like what's going on in Romania, and we see what's going on in like Italy, and there's kind of a bit of an independence movement from what I understand going on there as well too. If we're going to have capital controls keeping dollars inside of the US, or at least trying to draw them back onshore, wouldn't that necessitate that the rest of the world is going to have to move to something else for the pristine collateral? And do you see Bitcoin and gold being the collateral instead of T-bills that's necessarily moving around in the Eurodollar system?
Well, the problem with that is that Davos absolutely does not want hard collateral in their system. Their system is predicated on selling your life back to you at pennies on the dollar through debt and debt slavery. I just published a podcast with Ian Burlingame on Friday for Saturday morning. Which I really do recommend everybody listen to. And yes, if you think I've dropped a lot of F-bombs in this thing, no. It's definitely not for safer work. Put the headphones on, keep the kids corralled after the kids go to sleep. Don't listen to it at work unless you get your headphones on. Because I met somebody who's even more base than I am, and nice. He's now my new best friend. I mean this sincerely. Ian is great. And he reframes a lot of this for us in a way that is very powerful. He's published a couple of articles recently what he describes as the financial kill chain. And it's a 7-step process to destroy a country from within through financialization, through asset identification and then assets, and then infiltration, and then liquidation. And we are between steps 6 and 7 in the United States. You are in Canada between steps 6 and 7. Like, we're right there, and they're pulling the plug on all of this stuff. And that's always the last. That's always the last stage of the thing. But fine. But China was at that moment. I've alluded to these ideas earlier in the podcast. China was there at one point before Xi was elevated by the oligarchs. The Russians were there when Putin was elevated by the oligarchs. And by the same argument, the argument that Ian makes, and I think it's a powerful one, that Trump was elevated by our oligarchs here, a mixture of the DOD, the tech bros, and Wall Street said, that's enough. You're not taking our country. And we're going to bankrupt you this time. And you resist the financial kill chain, and like the whole world wants out of the system. And so Europe, that's why you're looking at Europe. Do you think Europe is going to go to hard collateral? They just said that we're going to outlaw, all financial privacy by 2027, including Monero and any Zcash and any of the privacy coins. Again, privacy coins were never going to dethrone Bitcoin. I've been an advocate of them in the past, and at times I own a little Monero, depending on what the ratio is. I'll futz around with these things every once in a while, and I think it's valuable that you have access to these systems, because being able to fully launder your money through a privacy coin, I think is a very powerful thing that we should all be able to do. Like, we shouldn't live in a world of open financial communication. But at the same time, that's a two-way street. The bad guys will use those same systems for their own purposes. And they've done it in the past with some of the stable coins. They used FTX for this shit. They used Terra Luna for this shit, which is why the Fed shut them all down. Like, this has happened in the past. And if you don't think, for example, the FTX and Terra Luna and all those other stable coins in 2022 were not executed by the Federal Reserve, you are terminally naive. They were. They were executed by the Federal Reserve, and Tether was allowed to stand tall as the antipode to trade, to allow Bitcoin to continue to have liquidity, because Bitcoin had value to the Federal Reserve in order to liquefy and be that hot money sink for the U.S. T-bill market. Very important. And so Tether's market cap is a very powerful lever that the Fed now has. It's $145 billion for the T-bills right now. It's a lot of money.
Yeah. I think the second buyer of short-term T-bills or something like that. Like, it's massive what they're picking up. Yeah.
Tether has a balance sheet and a profit structure as a company that's insane. It's truly insane. And the more you look at it, and so I've always and I know that there will be Bitcoin maxis in the audience who will be screaming, "Tether's a scam." I said this. I'm like, yeah, you've been listening to the same CZ Binance fucking FUD that's been coming out of the friggin' the fucking bowels of the city of London now for the last 10 years, and you can't get over yourself. You need to stop it. You need to get over it and start looking at the way the world actually operates. Tether is partnered with the Federal Reserve. Okay. And I've been saying for years that if you want something to really bake your friggin' noodle, just wait for the day the Fed puts Bitcoin on its balance sheet. Or did it already do so by proxy?
Yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering too, because I would feel that at least in the dying throes of central banks, they would try. They would never do it. Okay.
No, the ECB will never do it, because the ECB needs to collapse and destroy all the debt, collapse the member central bank's debt into the European Central Bank, reissue all of that as perpetual debt, collapse it, clean their balance sheet up, and then go for fiscal integration under the ECB as the central bank of the European Commission. That's what their plan is to do away with the Bank of Italy and the Bank of Portugal and the Bank of Spain and the Dutch Central Bank and the Bank of England and all that, to get rid of all of them and to bring them all under the rubric of the ECB as the single, right, just like we have the Federal Reserve, a single issuer of money and credit coming from one place. The ECB doesn't operate like the Fed does. It's not the same institution. It's a completely different set of operating parameters. But it wants to be the Federal Reserve. But it as of right now, it doesn't operate that way because there's no singular tax and spend authority.
I was going to say, wouldn't they have to bring the taxes under the just basically under the ECB as well too? And they'd probably want to even then have a company with the military as well too, like a European military.
Right, and well, that's why That's why Macron wants an EU army. That's why they keep trying to issue bonds through the European Commission. First, it was for climate change and the SURE bonds from 5 years ago. Then it was Ukrainian war debt. Blah blah blah. Hey, we can do it this way. We can skim the interest off the Russian seized forex reserves, and we can issue debt against them, and then we can tax the people for. They've tried every freaking thing imaginable, and the market keeps rejecting it over and over again. And so they don't. So when I keep saying, like, the more I watch this play out, the more I'm like, whoever is behind Trump understands how to beat these people. They've sold it to Trump. Trump is executing as the front man, and it's just running. And so geopolitics, national politics, financial markets, it's all the same thing. It's all the same story. And the real war is not kinetic. The real war is financial. But if we lose the financial war, the real war will become kinetic because that's their only other option. But if you don't have an army and you can't get the Americans to fight for you, and you can't get the Americans and the Russians to hate each other, then how are you going to win? Well, you win by turning, Canada into global homeland and steal the Australian elections and everything else. I'll be honest with you. I know I've talked to Canadians about how the voting system in Canada works. I believe that there are enough, really stupid Canadian boomers, just like we have a lot of stupid American boomers who hate Donald Trump and will just vote, against their own best interest because they hate Donald Trump. And it also proves to me that, as bad as we think our captured media is here in the United States, that your media is even worse. And if you think of it, so it's hard for me as an American to believe that anybody's media could be worse than ours.
No, it's
I'm beginning to see it. So, but I can also believe that they put their thumb on the scale of the election as well.
I agree. If I have to assume that there's cheating in every election, it's just a matter of who, how much, and by how, and which side is basically pushing it harder. And in particular with the parliamentary system, it's much easier because you can also try to remove votes from one candidate as well as try to add votes to another. Like, there's a lot more room to play with. And in particular in Canada, I was coming to the conclusion recently, and I could be wrong on this, I haven't thought out too much, that I think the idea of Conservatives winning in Canada again is actually impossible based on how the seats are distributed towards the East and how it's gone to such a tribal extent that people are just voting for their team. My conclusion, kind of basically following Trudeau's resignation, was that Trudeau had become so unpopular and untenable that people were basically voicing an opinion that they would vote for somebody else. But as soon as they had an excuse to go back to being on their side again, back with their original home team, they just immediately did. And I think we'll see that East and West divide continue to polarize, ultimately pushing Alberta to independence.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And it's a very astute point, to be honest with you. We have the same problem here in the United States. And the good news is that we've, because it's such a big country, that you can have brain drain out of Illinois and New Jersey and New York and California and other places, and have them move, and have the good people leave those states, move to other states. And then, when we were worried about with migration, internal migration, was that we would get all these Californians would come to Florida and then turn Florida blue. That's not what happened. Florida became more red because people from California, the Republicans of California, just all moved here and they all left. And they were all, and that's what we've seen. But I can tell you that, here in Florida, like, you can't you can't come here with California plates and immediately assimilate into the culture. It just doesn't happen. But that divide is more real than it ever has been. But that's fine. What let me correct me if I'm wrong, Nathan. I saw something the other day. Maybe you can help me with this, just to make sure that I'm not wrong about this. That the number of seats in Parliament, that the East is vastly overrepresented on a population basis versus Alberta.
Yeah, both Senate and House.
And it hasn't been properly reapportioned.
Correct. Yeah, it's something like basically your maritime votes get like a 1.55 kind of value by weight based on the population. So the Maritimes get way more representation. You've got way more seats. Basically, the entire election is decided before it hits like the Manitoba border. Like
Right.
as those polls are closing, our votes essentially mean nothing, and they just kind of cast into the void. And in particular, without having like the NDP, like the socialist, really heavy socialist party, with having them, I think they threw it. I think that they got offered basically a deal and they threw it, because without having them to steal any votes or pull any way from the Liberal side, there was just no winning. And I'm curious how you see this kind of playing out in the sense, because I think that independence is going to be on the table. And I definitely think that the East is going to try and offer some sort of concession, particularly on energy, and try and maybe even shift their, because I can't see that the globalists push for like net zero actually being beneficial to them in the long run as well too. I think it just impoverishes everybody. And I could see them wanting to make a switch on that. And I don't want them to placate Alberta to say like, okay, we'll tell Quebec to shut up and we're going to put a pipeline through. I want to get all that interprovincial migration of the best and brightest. I want to get the Bitcoiners congregating in Alberta and have an opportunity to actually do something on our own the way that we foresee that it should be to our best interest from the beginning. But I worry that, like, especially post-COVID too, right? How everybody simply forgot and went on with life. Like, I'm wondering we had a podcast last week with Peter St. Donge, and he talked about the pitchfork standard. Like, when things get so bad, people actually rile up. And I can't believe we haven't hit that point yet.
Yeah,
and I feel like we need that kind of energy to actually move through on either sovereign nation of Alberta or 51st state of Alberta, which I think both of which are a huge improvement.
I agree.
I'm wondering.
I agree.
I'm wondering.
I'll say this to start out with. I don't know that. I mean, Alberta. I mean, just looking at it from an American electoral map perspective, I'd have to look at the population of Alberta and add it in to see how many electoral votes and whether or not they become a state or not. They would come in as a territory. It would take statehood. Statehood is not automatic, even for something as powerful as Alberta, the United States. Not traditionally, if you look at the process of how states have been added to the United States. But either way, even I think that what you have to realize ultimately is that the United States needs a land bridge with Alaska.
Yep. Okay.
I mean, we just do. We need a land bridge to Alaska. To properly unlock Alaska, we have to be able to. We have to be able to bring goods out of Alaska down through Alberta, which is flat around the Canadian Rockies, and get down into the United States directly that way. And we also need access to, I'll be frank and honest, to the port, to the export terminal Kitimat in British Columbia. Very, very important. So you open up British Columbia, you open up Alberta. I think the whole area comes to the U.S. ultimately. I think it's in your best interest. I think it's in our best interest. I absolutely think it's in your best interest. And to be honest with you, if you're a Canadian, you're listening to me talk about it in these terms, I want you to remember something. We already had a conversation. We started this conversation up by talking about The Sopranos. Let's talk about how New York culture is completely different than Florida culture, which is completely different from Texas culture, which is completely different from Ohio culture and Appalachia, which is completely different from California or Big Sky country out in Montana and Idaho and all the rest of it. The one thing about America, I've said this for a long time, the decentralist in me, and I've talked this morning, I sound like a raging fucking fascist, but the truth of the matter is I really do believe the world is better served by us breaking the world up into as many component parts as possible, but not at this moment in time. Like I think the United States is too big to govern. I think the United States has 14 different subcultures. All right, you ask me. I remember going back to 2005, and I was drawing up how the United States would split apart. I used to literally go to my whiteboard, I had an 8x4 whiteboard in my office. The last chemist job I had, and at times I would just sit there and draw the United States, and I'd just break it up into different countries. I mean, it was crazy. I was thinking about that back in 2005, 2006, 2007. That being said, bringing Western Canada into the United States, you will not be Western, who you are currently. You will be that and American. And at the same time. And that's the thing that I think in many ways we still do really well. I don't want Albertans to not be Albertan. I want them to know what it means to be Albertan and then be proud of that and go, welcome to Alberta. Like, yeah, welcome to Alberta. Cool. The only thing that would change is the fact that we don't have to show our fucking passport at the border. And then we use the same damn currency, but life for you does not change other than you get access to the First Amendment and the Second Amendment and all the other things that go along with it. And you don't have to deal with being beholden to a crown 6,000 miles away. Yeah, you're beholden to a fucking president in Washington, D.C. We're going to fix that shit too. Like, help us fix that. Help us fix that. There's a huge two-way street that opens up here for everybody. And if you start to think of it in those terms, and it's not, you want decentralization. I want decentralization. But at the same time, we do have still have a strong federalist system. And people forget that the reason why, the presidential election in the United States is so freaking weird is because we really are a confederation of 50 countries. I mean, go read the thing is, this is the very, I don't know. I know the provinces in Canada are very, very powerful and they're very strong. You guys still have the only thing you're going to really have to give up is interprovincial tariffs.
Yep.
And protectionism, because that's a no-no. That's what you'll have to give up. What you'll get is the ability to still govern your province however the hell you want. Ultimately, you'll have plenary policing power. At the end of the day, the federal government does not have plenary policing power. This is one of the things that the globalists have sold to the shitlibs on both coasts that has to be taken back by the states. And that's why we're watching the powerful states, the good powerful states, really push back against this stuff. We were watching guys like DeSantis in Florida and the guy in Tennessee, I don't remember his name, and other places where they're really starting to explore just what they're allowed to get, to explore the jurisprudence of the supremacy clause in the U.S. Constitution. It's been, the globalists have run a truck through the General Welfare Clause and Interstate Commerce Clause in the United States Constitution. That needs to end, because 90% of that shit is all unconstitutional. Like, every bit of it. We have a long way to go to unwind all that stuff. But with a shift in mindset and a shift in culture, that'll come back very quickly, because the legal mindset is still here. It still exists. So all we have to do now is just dismantle a lot of the intelligence state and all the rest of it. I don't know if it's possible in the age of AI and all the rest. This may all be a fucking pipe dream, but if we want it, we can have it. And we have to choose to want it. We have to decide that that's what we want. And then we have to make that happen. And if that means being uncomfortable for a little while, and I don't mean by being uncomfortable that Amazon Prime takes 4 days as opposed to 2 days. I mean, really uncomfortable. Well, then, that's what you have to do, because nothing worth having is not worth fighting for.
Agreed. I want to even just add to that and kind of echo some of the sentiment. Like, I think from the Alberta perspective and the Canadian perspective as well, too, I think the writing is very clearly on the wall that the new administration, the new Carney government, is going to go after censorship. They're going to go after all the forms of communication and try and keep a lid on that. But in particular, with the ties with Europe and his ties to, again, he was at the Central Bank of England, he was at the Central Bank of Canada, and I know that Europe is pushing for their CBDC as well, too. I think 100% that's coming to Canada. I think that they're going to go after Bitcoiners and try and lock down that capital and make life very difficult for them. And I think they're going to be introducing a CBDC, particularly if you look at Canada on a per capita GDP. We're just struggling, and we have unbelievable amounts of wealth and resources that we're just completely hamstringed by, which I think where a lot of the frustration east to west comes from. So there's that aspect. I think for our own benefit and freedom and protection going forward, that we have that incentive to do it. And then the other one too that I hear a lot of people talk about is it wouldn't be that easy. It would be so hard. What about all these things? Constant different. It's the one thing that I would love to at least take this opportunity to communicate to people is you can just do things. You can just do things. We can just start to make things happen and push it in that direction. And in particular, let's just say we're sitting down at the negotiating table with the U.S. If we got access to Alaska, if we got access to ports, if we've got tons of hydrocarbon, we've got tons of uranium, we've got a lot to negotiate with. I've heard people be we don't have our own military. Well, how about we just make friends with the big one down south? It's not very hard to just be like, hey guys, do you want to put an Arctic basin and have access to Alaska, and in exchange just don't let anybody fuck with us? I think that's a good way to go.
Sounds good.
Right.
And why don't you adopt and again, you really want to you really want to unlock that national wealth. You cut a deal with us to help develop all the oil and gas assets and everything else. We help you. We pull a royalty stream off a part of it. We put it in our sovereign wealth fund. We use that to back a digital dollar and an internal dollar, which then funds Social Security. The plan, the part that Trump has not communicated with everybody yet is that the sovereign wealth fund is going to be used to fix Social Security and Medicare. I know Albertans are like, we have all this wealth. Yes. Well, the United States is the same way. The United States has vast amounts of wealth that has all been written on our balance sheet down to zero by these freaking globalists and all this EPA bullshit and all the rest of it. And who does that serve? It doesn't serve the United States. It serves Europe because they don't have anything. So by bringing us low, they are made relatively better. That's the way they think, right? As opposed to just bringing the cost of general commodities around the world down so that everybody can live freer and happier and generate wealth for themselves. No, they don't see it that way. We are ruled by people who see the world as a zero-sum game, and they have to maintain dominant market share. Otherwise, the hoi polloi and the help will get uppity, and then we won't have beautiful Eastern European women to be our whores, and their grandmas and their grandmas to be our housekeepers, and the brown people to dig our ditches, and the Chinese people to make all our cheap crap and our Gucci bags, and that's the way that, and the French farmers to make the beautiful cheeses and all the rest of it. That's the way they think. We're just a help to them.
Yeah,
and that should make your blood boil. Because these people have absolutely no reason to believe that they are better than us in any way. And if you listen carefully to the whole overeducated, waspy, boomer mindset, boomer for lack of a better term at this point, because they've been like completely subsumed into this mindset, that the overeducated liberal mindset of Europe beautiful and good, and America and Little Britain and Western Canada mouth-breathing morons bad. That's a psyop, folks. These people are not that smart. And they have no business thinking that they have the right to rule you because they nominally have 3 more IQ points than you do because they bias the test towards them as opposed to you. When at the end of the day, they can't even fix their own fucking toilets.
Yep.
And fixing the toilet's easy.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree.
There's YouTube for that shit. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Even if you don't know how to do it today, there's YouTube for that shit. Because there's 100 rednecks on YouTube teaching you how to fix your dryer or whatever. That has to go away. That unearned sense of entitlement of being your betters, that has to go away. And at the same time, so when I let off the podcast, it was a little inflammatory on purpose about Americans for the most part. When we think about Canada, it's really when it comes down to maybe the Stanley Cup Finals, if there's a Canadian team in the finals or not. We don't really think about what goes on north of the border. Maybe we should, and maybe that's to our eternal shame. But at the same time, Canada has a terrible inferiority complex when it comes to the United States. That needs to go away as well. And that's what I mean by not having an ethos. We need to that all of this needs to go away. Our superiority complex needs to go away, which we learned from the Europeans. And your inferiority complex has to go away. And everybody needs to realize that we all have value. We all bring value to the table in different ways. And let's stop this nonsense of allowing them to institute the family system of narcissistic abuse on the children, which is who we are. They're the freaking narcissistic abusive parents, and they're getting the kids to fight amongst themselves. Well, I'm the favorite of Davos. No, I'm the favorite of no, I'm daddy's favorite. No, fuck you. Daddy's in a white beater with a friggin' baseball bat, but the difference is that he projects that he's wearing a suit and goes to work every day and actually is cultured, and he's not. He's the same He's the same brutal thug that they've been fighting internecine wars in Europe for 2,000 fucking years. We're the Europeans that left, we're the Englishmen that left. We really learned autonomy and sovereignty from the Native Americans, enshrined it in the Constitution here in the United States. Canada was settled by the people who lost the Revolutionary War, took over Ontario, and then set themselves up as the antipode to the U.S. And in many ways the French, resistance moved into the Gulf Coast, and then they've never given up their desire to get the colonies back, because they've always understood that North America is the fucking prize, because it is. So that needs to end. It just needs to go away. We need to stop fighting amongst ourselves and realize that daddy hates both of us.
No, I completely agree. And the idea that we should be aligning ourselves with Europeans overseas versus just creating this North American strength is just preposterous to me. But it kind of fits in line with that idea of, like, we've had the psyop of, overvaluing the intellectual and completely ignoring the producers and the doers and the entrepreneurs, right? You've been tricked into thinking that the people in the ivory tower know better than you, than the guy who can actually fix your toilet and fix your car and get shit done for you.
Right. At the end of the day, Bren Bernanke is not smarter than you are.
Yeah.
He's not. As a matter of fact, and he's not worth more than you are. Actually, as a matter of fact, Janet Yellen's a fucking mouth-breathing moron.
Yeah, I was going to seem that way.
It just does what she's told. Because anybody who spends their entire life in service of Marxism the way she has, she's not smart.
No.
And neither is Chuck Schumer, neither is Justin Trudeau, and neither is Christy Freeland, or pick your poison. Like, none of these people are smart. And even this, and the worst part, the part that really bothers me, is the ones who are smart enough to know better, the Ted Cruzes, who really get my goat. Because Ted Cruz, if he had a fucking ounce he had an ounce of fight in his fucking body, that guy had one ball left, half a ball left, he wouldn't be Ted Cruz. Because he should know better. Pisses me off. That guy pisses me off.
I agree. Those are always the worst ones, the ones that should know better. And even to that point too, even kind of round this out a little bit, with everything that's going on, we're seeing the geopolitical moves, with the ending of central banking, with the problems and the crises that are kind of on the horizon. I think there is going to have hard times ahead, but man, is there a great opportunity? Particularly, I would reach out to Bitcoin or say, get to Alberta. We can start to do things. We can have a seat at the new table. We can be done with the high table, and we can craft the world that we want. But we have to want it. We have to know who we are and why we want it, and absolutely go for it. And I think that the future for Bitcoin in particular, as well as gold, and just even the libertarian philosophy, I really empathize with your point about kind of putting the libertarian sensibilities aside for a second, in the sense that I really struggle with the idea of the pragmatist versus the libertarian theory. Because I very much so in that Rothbard and camp. And it's like, okay, but what's the best method to get there? What do I have to do to achieve that versus what I want immediately?
In all the discussion about Rothbard and Mises and this guy, that guy, does anybody forget that all the libertarians that are out there that are like a little horrified by this or that, and their feet like, can you talk to me about libertarian justice theory? Okay. Walter Block used to talk about this shit all the damn time. Gave speech after speech after speech. What's libertarian justice theory? An eye for two eyes and a little bit of scaring? These people stole from you. You don't just get back the money they stole from you. You get the money back plus another share of whatever they stole from you, plus the right to terrorize them because they terrorized you. It's the most brutal fucking system of justice there is. And you've all subsumed that into, it's against the non-aggression principle. No, the non-aggression principle says, no, fuck you. When you violate the non-aggression principle, these are the rules of how we deal with the problem. But everybody forgets that part. And I wonder why that is. Maybe it's because modern libertarianism has been co-opted by those who have promulgated the psyops to turn you and take away from you your best years, your most fruitful years, your most powerful years as a man from the age of 20 to 50, and leave you spinning and arguing how many Rothbards can dance on the head of a fucking pin, when you should be out there going, these people fucking stole from me. I want my money back. I remember that phase of libertarianism when I got involved in the early aughts, and we sat there and we talked about how we should go after these people. I'm like, oh no, absolutely. I'm going to get every dollar back from Social Security. When I took unemployment, should a libertarian take unemployment? Fuck yeah, they stole my money in the first fucking place. I not just want my unemployment back. I'm going to stay on unemployment for as long as possible while I'm working a fucking side gig under the fucking table. Are you kidding me? That's the mindset you have to have. Should a libertarian work for government? Sure. Get your tax money back. They stole from you beforehand. Now you make a career out of it. It's a different story. I spent 5 years working for for the state government. I got the money they stole from me back, and then I went off to work in an oil and gas startup, or not an oil and gas startup, but a nickel boron plating company. And but absolutely, we have every right. Like, I look around the world, I'm like, why is everybody arguing? They're all mass murderers. We have every right to just shoot them. We don't, because we're still reasonably civilized.
And insufficiently pissed. I think that's the other aspect there that's necessary.
Right. And people look at me and they go, Tom's got anger issues. I'm like, yeah, no shit.
Yeah.
Because I see the world for what it is. I'm like, no, we have every right to just walk up and go, citizens arrest. I know that woman stole from me. I'm just and they walk around insufficiently scared of who we are and what our power is. And because we have allowed them to teach us how to be helpless.
Yes.
So stop being helpless. And Bitcoin is just, in some ways, this is why I get angry with Bitcoin Maxi. This is why I get really mad with gold bugs. I get the same speech to gold bugs. Guys, we're just waiting for gold to go to $30,000 an ounce, and then you're going to own the world and you're going to be able to make it better. Bullshit. That's John Galt. You're running away to fucking Galt's because you don't have the goddamn balls to stay and fight. Fuck you. It's a construct here in your head. You're not feeling it. You're not living it. You're not trying to make the world a better place. You're imagining a world a better place. You're living inside Sherlock Holmes's mind palace and not actually applying it into the real world to catch the fucking bad guys and solve the goddamn crimes. I'm over it. And I'm glad you invoked the Peter St. Onge, because I fucking love Peter.
Oh, he's great.
Oh God, he's fucking awesome. I had him on the podcast. It was awesome. I listened to his videos every day. Peter's amazing. And here's the thing. And this is the thing that blows my mind. So the other day, right, talked the difference between having to deal with people whose libertarian fifis are getting their panties in a twist over the way Trump is going to do foreign policy. I love Daniel McAdams and those guys, but I can't listen to a thing they fucking say anymore about foreign policy because it's so completely, it's just, shut the fuck up. And then there's Peter St. Onge. The other day, he's goes through the GDP print, talks about how, government spending fell, but, private investment ballooned like you wouldn't believe. And it was brilliant and it was glorious and it's all good. And then he leaves at the end of this little 3-minute video. And I'm going to be talking with Maria Bartiromo on Fox News Business at 7:00 tonight. So Peter, because he's practical, understands what the long-term goal is now in a position to influence the way we speak about markets and about all of this stuff. It doesn't matter about the philosophy. He's on Maria Bartiromo, making an effect, having real practical effect, and popularizing good, solid ideas that will move us point A to point B to point C to point D to get to where we want to go. Meanwhile, I go to the Mises Institute to say the same goddamn thing at the keynote address back in October, and Tom Luongo calls me a fucking clown and shit cans the speech. Because it's a book club run by fourth-rate economists. And it was very sad. Not because they were angry at me, but because they didn't have the goddamn balls to stand up at the moment when they needed to go out there and practically affect public policy.
Yep.
Bitcoin maxis to me look like libertarians I used to hang out with in the Florida, the Florida Libertarian Party 20 years ago, arguing over whether we should, this new change, this new wording should carry these two clauses to be separated by a comma or a semicolon, which we argued about for 3 fucking hours. I'm not kidding. Like,
it's absolutely ridiculous.
We in the 2003 Florida Libertarian annual conference had a whole group of people walk out and deny a quorum over a fucking semicolon. I'm not kidding. I was on the XCOM I was on the executive committee at that point. And I was like, and they almost subsumed me into that shit. Almost. And then I walked away.
I think you land on a very important point too, that even for like the Bitcoin maxis, which I include myself in that camp, absolutely, is the sense that this thing doesn't win without you actually fighting and trying. Right? You can't just passively argue over theory. You have to go out there and do things. And you might fuck up and make mistakes as well too, but you have to go and do things.
And you also have to interface with the people who actually control the power and the money and explain to them and prove to them that you're a serious person looking to build something. It's the argument that Dexter White, my partner of Gold Goats and Guns, makes to me all the time. It's like, what have you built? What have you won? What have you done? Nothing. At the end of the day, you have an ethos, or maybe you don't have an ethos because you haven't been able to take your ethos and turn it into a telos and turn it into something real and tangible. From ethos comes telos. He's Greek. He's explained these things to me. I'm not particularly good with this shit. He's better at it than I am. I'm learning every day, Dexter. Eventually it gets into my head. And I'm like, that's the problem. And until it's not all just fun and games and Sal the Agorist making funny memes on fucking Twitter. This is serious. This is real. And we either fight for our country or we don't. And we go, this is why, I come back to this all the time, Nathan. I say to myself, think about the midpoint turn in Fight Club. What's the midpoint turn in Fight Club? It's when Edward Norton fights Angel.
Yes.
Played by Jared Leto.
Yeah.
And he beats the living shit out of him. And the narration is, I was angry about every penguin or every panda that wouldn't fuck to save the species. Perpetuate its species. And then he's asked by, his conscience, Brad Pitt, what the fuck was that all about? I just wanted to destroy something beautiful. And he was at a low ebb. That was his lowest moment, where he'd become now a thing that needed to destroy rather than create. And, that was his point of no return as a person. And his redemption story is he still goes through the whole process of tearing down the thing that he's really angry with, blowing up all the credit institutions. But he's able to eventually exorcise the ghosts. Okay, that makes Fight Club at least interesting from that perspective. But that moment, I got news for you. There were more of those people in that he's commenting on that at the end of the day, you will be beaten to death by people, nearly to death by people, no matter how beautiful your ideas, no matter how beautiful your ideas, they will come into contact with somebody so angry because you don't have a solution to the problem. And Fight Club was not a solution to the problem. The Fight Club within the movie was not a solution. It was a way to get out the aggression so that you could get to solutions eventually. It was an extreme overreaction to that. So, remember these things. You have to channel that into something constructive or it becomes destructive. And I think that modern libertarianism has become destructive. And so I still call myself a libertarian, but I still feel it. I still want that to be, but I can't. But I understand that I'm living in a world today where, look, one of the things about at the end of the day, when you start applying the non-aggression principle, there's going to be moments where you're going to have to violate your principles in order to be able to defend yourself. What are you going to do about it? Are you willing to make those tough decisions? You can kick yourself about it later. I'm telling this to my daughter all the time. We're going to break shit Trump and company are going to break shit while we tear down part of this system, when we fight people who have absolutely no compunction about using our humanity against us in every way, manner, shape, or form, I'll reinvoke COVID. So what are you going to do? How we win is more important than if we win. No, it's not.
No,
it's not.
no one uses principles against you too.
Fuck you.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Only people who don't have children think that way.
Yes.
You have a child and you're like, yeah, no, how I win does not matter. He goes in the ground. We'll deal with the consequences of it later. Mr. Luongo come with, okay, yeah, you're right. I used disproportionate amount of force for the guy who looked at my daughter sideways. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not going to ever do it again.
Yep.
And then the big question is, then there's other questions, but yes.
I'll say there's two things that I kind of want to touch on there that I think would be good to at least move forward on. Is one, I love the idea that you invoked Fight Club, because the one thing that also from that story that really stands out to me that I think people don't even necessarily realize, but they might be getting a sense of in the Bitcoin space, is that we are fucking everywhere. And we've been slowly moving through society into different positions and into different companies and different groups. Yeah. And a lot of us are hiding under the surface, because most that I talk to feel like they've never met one, but it's this giant, basically underground network that's building out. And so, yes, we're slipping into all forms of the existing power, into the existing structures and the institutions, and we're making way, especially as we're aging into those positions.
His name is Satoshi Nakamoto. His name was Satoshi Nakamoto. His name was Robert Paulson. His name was Robert Paulson. Same thing.
Which meatloaf, gotta love him.
Mm-hmm.
The question then that I guess I'll round out the conversation with, because we've been diving down some amazing rabbit holes, is Bitcoiners are gaining an influence. Mm-hmm. They're spreading everywhere. Our numbers and ranks are going up. Our capital and power behind us is growing as well too. And I think that you're also in alignment that this bull run's not even started and we've got so much more to go. What's the call to action then to actually move towards the world that we want to see and blow up the credit card towers?
That is to watch the United States pull back on the global dominance of the dollar in direct terms. The dollar can serve as the medium of exchange, or not even the medium of exchange, but the unit of account, without actually being the medium of exchange and without actually being the universal store of value. The dollar has to break itself off from the three forms of the three. Right now, the problem with the dollar is that it's all three aspects of money. Store of value.
I would argue too, but yeah.
What's that?
Said I would argue too, but yes.
No, all three, because 59% of the world's reserves are.
You're right. Yeah. Especially look at a global level. They're using it as they're using it as a
store
of value,
dude.
Yep.
And especially outside of the first world, it's still store of value. Store of value, unit of account, medium of exchange, and that leads to Triffin's paradox. And we have to reverse that. So we have to allow this to organically decide where we're going to go. We can still leave it as unit of account because it doesn't really matter what the unit of account is. It doesn't have to be the medium of exchange because we have digitized ways now. We have more. We don't have to have one currency to avoid egregious City of London Forex cost. We don't have to have one universal settlement currency anymore. It's not necessary. Like, I don't care if it's Ripple or another version of US, another thing on the Tether blockchain or whatever, whatever. It doesn't matter. What matters is those costs are dropping, and disintermediation, the blockchain technology really drives that disintermediation and gets rid of the toll booth and the middleman who gets to pull a VIG for doing no fucking work whatsoever, and then use that to turn that into political power. That's the world you want to live in. So I don't care what does that. I don't care if it's Bitcoin on Lightning Network. I don't care if it's Ripple. I don't care if it's Stellar. I don't give a fuck what it is. Right? There may be other systems out there and they may all compete, but guess what? Blockchains can talk to each other really, really easily. Inter-blockchain stuff is easy, right? So what matters then is that, and anybody who, and more importantly, anybody who tries to put up a toll booth between those systems is going to fail again. Because we've proven you can just, we've proven all of this stuff. This has been done. So now the big question is, so that's the key. When the United States decides to be truly independent of the old system and dominate its system, its own system, while at the same time realizing it has to give up other parts of its system, which is what I think is happening. And we're doing it for our own survival. We're not doing it out of the goodness of our hearts. So the whole Bitcoin maxi argument, the gold bug argument, the BRICS argument, all of those things are reflections of the potential competition if the United States doesn't give up these things. So better that we give them up and then work towards a new system, yes, that we are dominant over, but then also spreads itself out across the world. So the Chinese will have their system, the Russians will have theirs, the Davos will have some remnant of theirs. There will be one centered in UAE and maybe even Singapore. Okay, fine. And the United States. And as long as the network and the costs and disintermediation costs, fees are dropped to nearly zero, which they should be, then you've lowered the power gradient between one group versus the other. And then everything trades on merit. So what the United States is doing now under Trump, what Trump is trying to say is we are going to defend ourselves and rebuild ourselves. And it may be ugly and we may do it in a gross and kind of crude way. But then again, what was done to us was done in a kind of gross and crude way. And we're at a crisis point. We don't have a lot of options. So we're going to do it. And it means we have to monetize, and we have to monetize onto the asset and liability part of the balance. We have two problems. I've explained this before, and this is the part that a lot of people don't seem to understand. If you do some corporate accounting metaphors for the United States, we have both a cash flow problem and a balance sheet problem. We're spending more than we take in, and we have a tremendous amount of liabilities and unfunded liabilities and not that many assets. So, well, the first thing we can do is we can fix the fiscal side of the equation. We can fix the cash flow, cut spending, figure out ways to raise tax revenue and bring those things in line. Cut spending by getting rid of waste and fraud and abuse and everything else, which is what's happening, and fewer dollars going out to people who fucking hate us to then destabilize us from within. That's process number one. That's one process, and it's not the same process as fixing the asset and liability side of the balance sheet. That changes as well. You fix like Social Security and Medicare, and that will also, and that cash flow will also fix the unfunded liabilities portion of the balance sheet. It will flow. That will flow from one to the other. But as you and I have talked about in relation to Alberta and the United States, there are all of these assets that we have written book value down to zero because of environmental policy. Well, bring those things online, and all of a we don't have a liability problem. Ian Burlingame brought up to me the other day the powerful point. What if a lot of this debt that we owe is owed to companies that were about to bankrupt? What if what if these companies all own all these freaking treasuries that that against each other, and they're all and then they cease to be? Well, the debt disappears.
Yep.
Oops. And the Fed keeps shrinking its balance sheet slowly, but it's doing it. Fixing the asset side of the balance sheet. This is a process. It's not going to be easy, but it's doable. The fact that just because the way things have always been this way does not mean they have to be that way tomorrow. This is the fundamental problem with Malthusian thinking, that whatever has been happening is going to continue into the future by sliding the little thing to the right in your Excel solver model and getting some catastrophic result. Law of diminishing marginal utility, first thing that every Austrian or Austro-libertarian learns, is dominates all human behavior. And we've gotten to the point where there ain't no more juice from the corruption squeeze. So now we got to go the opposite direction. So now there's going to be more juice from the decorrupting squeeze. And that part is the part that a lot of people are having a hard time wrapping their brains around. I'm not, because I know how, because as a libertarian who understands that a lot of this is incompetence and malice together, we can get rid of the incompetence and malice, and all of a sudden the budget's balanced, and then what happened? Now, I know there's going to be people in the audience, there's going to be comments like, oh, Luongo's full of shit. He doesn't know what he's talking about. That Trump's going to spend $1 trillion. And then they'll pull something out of the woodwork that they found out yesterday that they were told by the Davos and British controlled fucking media to tell them, oh, but he's going to spend $1 trillion on the military. Yeah, but I got news for you. A clean $1 trillion military budget versus which is very little of that is actually discretionary spending. So much of it, like there's so many ways of changing the accounting on the way we account these numbers. It's not even funny. We've been talking about this amongst ourselves on my Slack service for a while now. Like a lot of very, very smart people have just been looking at this going, this is all fixable. Every goddamn bit of it is fixable. And it's all about accounting. It's so much of it is accounting tricks, and how we account for it and how we popularize it in the headlines. The headlines don't necessarily mean what you think they mean, because the headlines have been curated to get a specific reaction out of you. What you don't realize, folks, is so many libertarians don't realize is that they believe that they are immune to the psyop when they are the actual target of the psyop, and then they become the perpetuator thereof. They are no different than the quote unquote sheeple that they think they're so much better than. Where have we heard that one before? So you really think you're that much better than the fucking boomers who are still wearing their masks in their cars? Saying trust all science? Really?
You're always susceptible to propaganda you agree with, and you're very susceptible to it.
Of course. Yeah, no, you really have to jack yourself out of you really have to check your premises at every moment. I can't stress this enough. And I know that you have to realize that I do that every day. I don't always succeed in doing it right, doing it well. I mean, there are days when I find myself going, I find myself bristling now at things people say that are reflexive. And I'm like, I really, I really shouldn't think that. He's not wrong, but I'm always thinking about it in like the 17 other different contexts. And I'm always thinking about a lot of different other ways, but as Corey, he's not really wrong about that, but like it happens all the time. We're all susceptible to it, and we all have to be willing to be challenged on it on a regular basis. So.
Beautiful. And with that, Tom, where can people go to check out more of your work?
TFL1728 on Twitter. That's where that's where the fun stuff happens on a day-to-day basis. Also, Patreon/Gold Goats and Guns, where you can sign up for either the twice weekly market reports or the Gold Goats and Guns monthly newsletter, and the blog, where I curate the podcasts and if I decide to actually write anything public anymore, which I haven't really done in a while. So, because I do too many of these and then I have no energy left to actually write anything. So, but ranting into a microphone's fun. It's very cathartic.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe, and check out the previous episode with Professor Peter St. Onge up above.